There is another term, though, that is becoming increasingly popular in the scientific community. It is the term wintergreen. They've been calling them wintergreen species, meaning they're green in the wintertime and they're not green in the summertime. They're deciduous, but they're reverse of everything else, which makes them wintergreen rather than summer green. Now, I have mixed feelings about how popular this term has become because there is a particular plant known as the wintergreen, and if you start calling everything that has this habit wintergreen, well, that opens up other sorts of confusion. But you will see the term wintergreen used in botanical papers and things to describe this particular plant and other plants like it that are green for half the year. This particular plant, since we're pointing it out as a start, is probably our most common native orchid, the cranefly orchid. It has green leaves on top, and the underside of the leaves are bright purple. You can see the bright purple color. Lots of plants can make anthocyanins, not unique to cranefly orchids at all. So here is a little greenbrier. And some greenbriers are deciduous, they lose their leaves. Some greenbriers are evergreen and they keep green leaves. And some greenbriers are somewhere in between. This one has kept its leaves, but what color have they turned? They've turned purple. So this greenbrier is struggling to keep its leaves functioning through the cold winter months.
That's a big dent for the putty wood.
So this is another native orchid, and it has a lifestyle similar to the cranefly orchid we were looking at before. Its leaves get a lot bigger, though, than cranefly orchids, and they have those white stripes, which makes them easy to distinguish. The underside of the leaf is not very purplish. Sometimes it's a purple tinge. It's often called putty root. It has an underground root, and the inside of the root is gummy. It's a gummy putty-like texture. That's how it got its name. It's not hard and crisp like a potato. And the underground tuber lives for many, many years. Each tuber makes one leaf per year, just one. The leaf emerges in the fall around October. It can do photosynthesis all through the winter. They found it can do photosynthesis even under an inch of snow, the sunlight filtering through. And then in spring, usually by April, they yellow and they die, just like the tree leaves do in the fall. So now we've got two different orchids that have both adopted this lifestyle, whether you call it reverse deciduous or whether you call it wintergreen. What's the point of leaves in the first place? Photosynthesis, that's right.
They get more sunlight in the wintertime.
So these orchids live in deciduous forests, and these orchids are very short. There is not a lot of sunlight on the ground floor in the summer. These orchids in the wintertime don't have to compete with the trees. So they only make one leaf per year. They soak up that sunlight all through the winter, and then when it starts to get shady, they don't have to worry about low intensity photosynthesis. They just let the leaf die and wait for the next season of leaf drop of the trees, and then they come right back again. This is Michella repens, commonly known as partridge berry.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And
just no berries right there.
Yeah, the birds will eat them. So it'll make little red berries, which are much beloved by birds.
Okay.
Is it evergreen?
It is. So both of those keep their green leaves 12 months out of the year. So evergreen is perfectly appropriate for either of those species. These are the left behind of agriculture. All of this that is Wilkerson today was farm, and it was cropland if you go back 100 years ago. And the farmers, when they plowed, did not love stones. So when they would hit stones, they would toss them over to the edges of their fields and pile them up, and you would end up with what was called a fieldstone pile. The field is gone, the field is turned into forest, the farm is gone, but the fieldstone pile remains essentially forever. We were trying to restore it to a natural environment. Japanese stiltgrass, though, has been a more challenging exotic plant. The blue line marks the edges of the stiltgrass removal zone, so it's like the front.
Okay.
And as we push the stiltgrass back, we adjust the flags. It's an irregular front. I admit it, it's an irregular front, but that's what that's about.
And do you have to pull it up by hand? Is that the only way to get rid of it?
It is a very effective way to get rid of it. There are chemical sprays that can be used, but there's a risk of collateral damage, so timing and concentration has to be done very deliberately to do that. We've been focusing on the manual method for that reason, especially when we had orchids in the same vicinity. Some of these putty roots here at Wilkerson have started doing something a little unusual. How many leaves does each putty root plant make?
Oh, you got 2 leaves over there.
The books will tell you they make 1 leaf per plant. This plant is not reading the books. It has made from a single root, not 1, but 2 leaves. Yeah, you can literally see where they come out of the same stem. They're both enfolded from the same bud. It's not 2 plants that are just very close together. They're emerging together. Christmas fern, pretty big. Leaves stay green 12 months out of the year. Very clearly evergreen. But we've got something else here as well growing with them. Here's one. Here's another. Here's a nice one.
Yeah.
Here's one right here. This is not a Christmas fern. This is sometimes called a grape fern. Sceptridium is the genus. A lot of people are putting it in nowadays. What color is it?
Purple.
Just that reddish, purplish color. It didn't start out that way. When this leaf emerged in late summer or early fall, it was green. But then as the temperatures started to drop in November, those green leaves turned purple. But they didn't die. The grape fern keeps its leaf for half the year, just like the orchids do. They emerge in the fall, and then they die in the spring. But they will often turn completely purple as soon as the winter temperatures start. Often thought that these wintertime bronze grape ferns may have been the inspiration for the red fern of the forest. Eventually this pine forest will turn into hardwoods. The pines will die out and be replaced by hardwoods, and it'll end up looking like that, but it takes time. So as you look at forests in our area, the abundance of pine is a strong indication of how long it's been since that particular parcel of land was in open field. And pretty much everything in Wake County was open field within the last 200 years. We don't really have virgin forest. It's just a question of how long it's been. But if you look around at this forest now, if you see any non-native trees or shrubs, please point them out to me, because we think we've gotten them all. It took several years, but digging them out, you dig them out, you cut them down. You don't wait to go and get your bottle of herbicide. If you see it, you cut it right then, and the next day you cut the next one you see, and you just keep going until you don't see any more. Some fungi prefer different soil types, so the soil type up here supports certain fungal species, whereas the soil type down there supports different fungal species. Many of these fungi are also attached to tree roots, so the orchids are actually more like parasites on the fungi. So the fungi may be symbiotic with a tree, and then the orchid is getting something from the fungi along the way. So the carbon that built that flower may actually have been photosynthesized by the trees overhead and is getting piped down through the networks of the forest. Trees like these American beeches, that the leaves were green in the summer and the leaves died in the fall, but the dead leaves didn't fall off. There is a term for this. It's called marquescent. We say that beeches have marquescent leaves, meaning dead leaves that continue to hang on the plant. There are different ideas about what possible advantage this could be. Dead leaves, especially dead beech leaves, are not very nutritious, and the buds, however, do have edible material inside them. It may be that the dead leaves are camouflaging and protecting the buds from deer. It may be that the dead leaves are protecting the buds from the extremes of the weather. It really does make beech trees stand out in a otherwise very bare forest. Southern sugar maple. Southern sugar maple is another tree that has the marquescent leaves that hang on to the twigs throughout most of the winter. Certain oaks will do it. Overcup oaks tend to do it, I've noticed. Not so much the red oaks and things.
Big leaves.
But there are certain oaks that do. You're right about that. This flat rock is a metamorphic rock. This is nice. Metamorphic flat rocks are extremely rare in Wake County. All of the big flat rock preserves are granite flat rocks. This metamorphic rock used to be much larger than what you see now. That cliff is entirely man-made. That hole with water in it, that's man-made too. That's what this would have been like up until the 1950s. Then they quarried it and blasted it and hauled it away. leaving the cliff. So the cliff is not a natural thing, but they did leave us this strip of flat rock here, which still preserves the original sort of appearance. So the little depressions become habitat for many species of moss and lichen, which are not able to survive anywhere else in the preserve and really can't grow in 99% of Wake County. This is a very rare, very limited habitat type. Many of the wildflowers bloom in the summer, so you're not seeing the wildflowers here, but their roots, sometimes their winter rosettes are tucked within the moss, so please do be careful. It's okay to step on the rock, but the living mats are sensitive. So coming in another season, you can appreciate the flowers, but even this time of year, the mosses and lichens have a beauty all of their own.
So is this why you wanted this piece of property, is to get this habitat?
We are very excited about this piece of property in large part due to this habitat, yes. I don't know of another metamorphic flat rock in Wake County in preservation. See the rock pinks, the Tlinum, it'll bloom here. You'll see the Hypericum gentianoides. You'll see, the Appalachian starwort or sandwort. You'll see lots of unusual rock outcrop species blooming here once the weather turns us into spring. It was very badly treated. So after the quarry ended, as often happens, the abandoned quarry was used for many decades as a junkyard. This was literally treated as a parking lot with rusting out hulks of cars lined up here, and oil barrels and all manner of garbage. There were also a lot of invasive species that came in with the disturbance. So all those stumps, those are all tree of heaven stumps. Removing the exotics, removing the garbage, and preserving the remnant populations. So on a small flat rock like this, it really is almost that every plant counts. But we're very happy to have it in preservation. It was all part of Dr. Annie's gift, and we're happy to be able to clean it up and preserve it for the future. But this area, because of the cliffs and the sensitivity, is not on the regular public trail. The granite that's being quarried in Roseville isn't used for building stone, it's used for gravel. This was used to build buildings. The state capitol building downtown is built out of gneiss. Wherever they could find this quality of stone, it was quarried. Even if it was a very small outcrop, they would often quarry it. They might have to cease operations after a half dozen years because they would get it all. There are very few spots like this left. And this one, as you can see, was mostly lost, but at least there's a small bit of it. And it gives us a picture of what an unusual habitat may have been once more abundant, but still exists today in these small patches. I know it's not as pretty in the wintertime. These would have little flowers all over them in the summer. It is the hardest gneiss, the hardest and most durable of all Raleigh's different grades of gneiss. And it does occur in a 40-mile long line that starts down at Lake Wheeler Dam, runs through the middle of Raleigh, up roughly where Falls of Neuse Road is, through Wilkerson, up to Falls Lake Dam, and then up into our county neighbor to the north. And there were many little outcrops and quarries operating all along that narrow band. If you go down in downtown near Oberlin Road, you know where the Harris Teeter Shopping Center is on Oberlin Road? If you drive behind the Harris Teeter, you can see the quarry wall of this rock, where that shopping center was built on top of the abandoned quarry after they blasted away the flat rock, and then they built on top of the empty space. But you can still see there's like a little cliff of this rock on the back side of the shopping center. So this band went right through downtown. The NC State bell tower is on kind of a little rise. That's where this ridge goes through. Yates Mill Dam is where it is, because that's where this same band of rock crossed that creek. Many of our dams were built wherever this narrow band was crossed by water, because if you want to build a dam, you want a strong foundation. You want the strongest rock around. This was the strongest rock. Falls Lake Dam, huge reservoir. Where are they going to put it? Where does the Neuse River cross the strongest rock of all? At the falls, where it crosses this rock for half a mile. And that's where the giant dam got built. So Falls Lake, would Falls Lake exist without this rock? Maybe, but the dam may have been put at another location altogether. Would Raleigh exist without Falls Lake as a city of, 500,000 people? Hard to imagine. So this rock has been shaping Raleigh's history from the very beginning, from the days of Yates Mill and even earlier. It was the gneiss that created the Falls of the Neuse, the hardest rock of all that made a waterfall in the Neuse River, and waterfalls on every other stream that kind of went over it. So Yates Mill, Lake Wheeler Dam, Harps Mill, all those little dams were built on the little waterfalls where the creeks went over this night. If you follow this line, like a 40-mile long line, if you follow it that way to the northern half of the park, we have this same type of rock creating a boulder outcrop that our Hidden Rocks Trail leads you to. But the boulders don't support the rare plant communities that a flat rock does. You have a tree canopy overhead, and many of these small flat rock herbaceous plants require something like full sun. So they needed an expanse of flat rock to really create that canopy gap. A forest boulder outcrop doesn't have that same canopy gap. To get a flat rock, you need the rock itself to be relatively unfractured. You need to have had a less geologic fracturing in the rock mass. And then you don't want it to be too raised up, too exposed, or else, erosion is accelerated. But if you've got an unfractured rock mass and it's not at too much of a topographic high, the sheer lack of fractures, erosion has a hard time getting started. And so you end up with a big, flat, unbroken, what's often called pavement type outcrop, rather than a boulder type outcrop. Yeah, once you start to have cracks, you saw how the flat rock, it was truly, there weren't even fissures. If there were even little cracks, water gets in, water freezes, the crack widens, roots get in, the roots dissolve. Once it starts to have cracks, then this is the inevitable outcome. But if the rock was extremely uniform and solid, then there aren't those little starting points.